postponing it until the day before for you AQA students. But here is an Inspector Calls GCSE Key Quotes video. Now, ensure you like and subscribe so I can be even more empowered to create more key quotes videos and to ensure that you can get the highest grade possible in English literature. And I also thank my brother and sister for keeping on encouraging me to make this video, even when it seemed a bit tough to do so. So, the first key quote you need to know is going to be, "I can't accept any responsibility." At first, this just echoes, oh, Priestley may be trying to achieve socialism by rejecting Mr. Burning's views, and you wouldn't be wrong. But the one thing that you need to know is that Mr. Burning says "I," which refers to himself, obviously, but also highlights the selfish capitalist views that in the post-Edwardian era, the bourgeoisie, or the upper class people, were sometimes taking to heart. And it's also important to note that this acts as a contrast to socialism's message, which is to share wealth equally, whereas capitalism is just prioritizing profit over people, because economically speaking, businesses most value profit in economics, to all you economics students out there. So, carrying on from there, Mr. Burling also says "can't." This verb "can't" suggests that he is unable to accept any remorse or any shred of guilt for Eva Smith's suicide, and is unable to accept his role in that, which suggests that since Mr. Burling is a construct for upper class society, Priestley is saying that because of the classist divisions that occurs, upper class society has become callous and rather selfish, rather than thinking about the welfare of others, actually trying to apologize or show remorse or make amends in society. The quantifier "any" in "I can't accept any responsibility," it demonstrates that he is unable to accept any responsibility at all, and that he is not going to even try to accept any at all. And this quote absolutely highlights the message of what Priestley is demonstrating to post-Edwardian audiences, that not accepting any responsibility makes you selfish and makes you rather dogmatic in society. So it's really important to accept responsibility, so that way you can better society, even if you can't undo the action that you did. The next quote that I'm going to mention is, "A man should mind his own business and look after himself and his own." This is again stated by Mr. Burling, but instead of the previous quote, which was in Act 2, this one is in Act 1. Now he says, "A man has to mind his own business and his own, and look after himself and his family." The repetition of reflexives and pronouns of himself and his and him so highlight the selfishness that Mr. Burling or upper class society have, and the fact that they are not willing to be compassionate. In addition, business could be a play on two things: Burling and Croft that Mr. Burling owns, or the fact that he is only willing to aid his own family and himself to benefit himself rather than actually make an impact in society. And this And this is a really, really important quote, because if it were just that, a random quote, then no one would actually be able to analyse it or just pick much up on it apart from Priestley's socialist message. But because of that, the sharp ring of the bell, sharp ring of the doorbell is the signalling of the inspector. And this is really important because it demonstrates the fact that Priestley is rejecting Mr. Burling's capitalist tirade, and it demonstrates that Mr. Burling has failed to take the call to action to make himself more responsible and more remorseful towards society and actually make a profound impact in society. Another important aspect about that is that Mr. Burling later says in Act 3 to his children, Eric and Sheila, the famous younger generation who can't even take a joke. Then afterwards, he gets interrupted by the sharp ring of the telephone. This is very important because it acts as the cyclical structure of Mr. Burling. Not following the call to action also marks the arrival of the real inspector. And this is the fire, blood, and anguish that the Burlings have to endure, because Mr. Burling is shutting down the socialist accurate messages that his children are taking to hand, and Mr. Burling is essentially rejecting it. So essentially, he'll have to go through that cyclical structure of having to go through the same lessons again and again until he totally endures a major shift. And that also goes with the rest of the family, since you could also argue that Eric and Sheila show promise. They don't actually act on what they say. They say, you're beginning to pretend this is what. So essentially, Eric and Sheila say that they're beginning to pretend that nothing happened, essentially speaking. But they don't actually act on it. You don't see them act on it. So essentially, all of the family, all of the members of the Burlings, including Sheila and Eric, who are newly transformed by the inspector, they'll have to go through this message again and again until they have newfounded morals. This also reflects upper class society and also acts as a message for all of society, because it also means that all people who refuse to accept any responsibility and refuse to accept the welfare of society will end up not being able to have freedom until they finally accept their responsibility, finally accept the morals that they have to do, and accept the socialist message that Priestley is trying to bring about to society. Now, I'm going to use a stage direction quote. This is really important because it's not really mentioned by anyone, but I'd just like to bring it up. It says that initially, the house of the Burlings should be directed as pink and intimate, and when the inspector arrives, it should turn into brighter and harder. So, pink and intimate suggests a pretense or a facade of the Burlings, that they seem to be compassionate and responsible people, but then when the inspector arrives, he shines a metaphorical light on them to reveal their errors and their secrets and their irresponsible ways in order to make them change. So the inspector is used as a raisonneur, which is RAISSONEUR, which means mouthpiece. So Priestley is using inspector as a mouthpiece, so you can use raisonneur in your AQA English Literature exam, and that will actually impress the examiner. But the inspector is using But Priestley is using the inspector as a mouthpiece in order to suggest that even people who seem responsible and seem morally correct to have their secrets revealed. And this isn't so that the inspector can change them, it's so that he can get them to become more responsible and take the call to action. That's why it's inspector calls. It's to get society to take the call to action that they need to. Shine the light, get exposed, and embrace that light out of darkness. Otherwise, they'll experience the fire and the blood and the anguish that will eventually happen to all of society if they do not change their capitalist attitudes. So essentially, that's a pretty versatile quote to use. You could use it to show that Mr. Birling and Mrs. Birling are static characters, aka they do not change, or they're dogmatic in their ways. And you can also use that to demonstrate that Eric and Sheila are actually remorseful and are conforming to the socialist ways that the inspector presents to them. Now, another quote I'm going to use is from the inspector himself. He says this at Act 3, in his final speech before he leaves the Birling's house, where he says, "We are members of one body. We are responsible for each other." Now, "we are members of one body" suggests that society should be unified rather than divided. So it acts as a contrast to the post-Edwardian division in society, which is the classist attitude of upper class being prioritized over the lower class. And another word you could use for the lower class is the proletariat, which is Protellariat. So, proletariat. Now, this means that society is currently prioritizing upper class over lower class. So this means that society should be unified and embrace to care for all people, be responsible for all communities, all people around them, regardless of any demographic they may have, regardless of any social stigmas there might be. And Priestley is again using the inspector as a mouthpiece to show that society should be compassionate to one another, just be unified, rather than just be prejudiced and end up having the chaos that was Eva Smith's suicide, due to the prejudice of the lower class citizen in Bromley. Now, a really important aspect of this is that you could also link it to, as a fact that it's a biblical illusion. A biblical illusion. So an illusion, Allusion, not to be confused with illusion, something which seems real but doesn't actually exist. Illusion. So an illusion is a reference to something. So for example, if you said something was a World War illusion, that would be a reference to the World War. So, biblical illusion means a reference to the Bible. So, Priestley uses "we are members of one body" as a biblical illusion to demonstrate just how Jesus shared bread and wine with his disciples at the Last Supper, to show that they are not less than God and that they are all unified with God even after his crucifixion and resurrection, since Priestley's audiences were predominantly Christian. This allowed them to realize that being unified isn't just something that is morally correct. It's something that could be justified as a Christian message. So, being members of one body is very important because it demonstrates that even despite all the scandals or any situations that may occur, it is really important to stay unified in whatever you do. in whatever society does, which is what Priestley is trying to teach his audience. Another quote, the final quote that you could use, the final quote you could use is millions and millions of Eva Smiths and John Smiths, which is a particularly useful quote. Now, millions and millions of Eva Smiths and John Smiths signifies that the suicide of Eva Smith doesn't mean that she is more or less important in society, in that Eva Smith is kind of treated as a social contract by Priestley to demonstrate the lower class sit in society, and the millions and millions of Eva Smiths and John Smiths suggest there are several lower class people that, like Eva Smith, should be treated with utmost respect and be cared for responsibly, rather than just left to waste away due to the upper class capitalist system. Now, what's important is that Priestley is trying to convey the message that regardless of whether a lower class person, regardless of whether lower class people get affected, you have to care for all lower class people. Not because you got caught or you got found out, like Mr. Burling did when he got caught to be the main perpetrator for Eva Smith's death, although that is arguable. It demonstrates that society has to be caring towards lower class people and not just abandon them in order to make just a profit, rather than care for the health and well-being of the people. So that's all the quotes I have for today. I hope you enjoyed this video, and I hope you understand that this is one of the final videos I'll be doing for English literature, because the exam for HUA is tomorrow. So I hope you be bright, stay right, like and subscribe if you enjoyed this video and you learned something from there, or you got some level 5 or level 6 elements that you could add to your essay. If that helped, please subscribe. You can comment. Be bright, stay right, have a good day, and I'll see you in the next video.